Yofi. Okay. Boker Tov, Erev Tov, good morning, Connecticut, good evening, Tel Aviv. Welcome to our very special program today, co-sponsored by the University of Connecticut Center for Judaic Studies and Contemporary Jewish Life, and the Singer Jewish Humor Lecture at the Maurice Greenberg Center for Judaic Studies at the University of Hartford. My name is Avinoam Patt. I'm the director of the Center for Judaic Studies at UConn, where I also hold the Doris and Simon Conover Chair in Judaic Studies. And it's a great pleasure to welcome all of you here for our program today, which, as we've said, is something of an international family reunion. So the Jews are coming is bringing families together from all over the world. Today's program is a little bit different, both because we have the amazing, hilarious, and supremely talented creators of HaYehudim Baim, the Jews are coming, joining us live from Tel Aviv, but also because we are currently technically in class. And so I want to welcome all of our community guests to today's meeting of Hebrew and Judaic Studies, HEJS 2200, Israel, History and Society, with my approximately 25 students who are in the class now, probably already with their cameras off. For the non-matriculated students who are here, I just want to mention that there will be a pop quiz at the end of today's presentation. And for the undergrads, I think you guys will agree you've worked hard enough this semester, so we'll let somebody else do the work for a change, right? Now, my students will tell you that I am something of a nerdy super fan of this show, and perhaps have been somewhat unreasonably excited about this program, hosting this program at this point of the semester. It's definitely the highlight of my semester. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the show, I'll just give a little bit of background. This sketch comedy series, HaYehudim Baim, or The Jews Are Coming, is a satirical TV show that completed its first broadcast season in 2015 and has recorded 3 more seasons since then, just airing its 4th season over the past few months. The show is broadcast on what was once Israel's historic and public Channel 1, for many years the only TV channel in the country, now Kan, Channel 11 technically, and is devoted to sketches that target the entire history of the Jewish people since biblical times. Unlike Eretz Nehederet, which some people might be familiar with, like The Daily Show, tends to focus on politics and current events, HaYehudim Baim analyzes central moments in Jewish history and culture through a comedic lens. The show features one of the foremost veterans of Israeli sketch comedy, Moni Moshonov. Some of you might recall him from Zeh, along with newer stars Yossi Marshak, Yael Sharoni, Ido Mosseri, Yaniv Biton, along with Mayan Bloom and Shira Naor. In addition to skits on the Hebrew Bible, so think of sketches that form humorous midrashim on the binding of Isaac, or Moses having to explain the 10 Commandments to the children of Israel, or a moody teenaged King Solomon having to explain his love poetry to his parents, David and Bathsheba, or priests in the temple who enjoy getting fat off the best offerings Israelites can bring them for sacrifice, while not really wanting to deal with the sins of their people, and other sketches that deal with great moments in Jewish history, the history of Zionism and the state of Israel, as well as sketches that offer satirical looks at World War II and the Holocaust. Since its premiere in 2015, the show has also roused the ire of the right wing in Israel for sketches that either address Jewish terrorists like Baruch Goldstein or Yigal Amir, along with complaints that it depicts sacred religious topics in a sacrilegious way, which we might argue is precisely the point of good Jewish humor. And indeed, The Jews Are Coming, HaYehudim Baim, has won the Israeli equivalent of what we would call the Emmy for Best TV Show or Best Comedy Show. And we might argue that more than any show in Israeli history has brought Israeli humor back into the mainstream of Jewish humor, which we can discuss. So it is with that introduction that I'm especially excited to introduce our guests today. Asaf Beiser is based in Tel Aviv. He's been a writer and showrunner in Israel's highest rated comedy, satire, and drama shows for over 15 years. He's the co-creator and head writer of the award-winning sketch comedy show we just talked about, HaYehudim Baim, The Jews Are Coming, and he was a writer for Fauda, The Good Cop, Eretz Nehederet, and many more winning programs for Israeli television. Welcome to Asaf. And Natalie Malkos. Natalie is a highly acclaimed award-winning screenwriter and director based in Tel Aviv. For the past 10 years, she has been a writer and showrunner on Israel's highest rated comedy, satire, and dramatic series. She is the creator and showrunner of the show that we're talking about today, HaYehudim Baim, and she teaches comedy writing and lectures about writing and Jewish history all around the world, and lives in Tel Aviv with her husband and 2 children. Now, one final note on the format for today's program. I would ask everyone to please stay muted during the program to minimize disruptions. We are recording the program and we'll take questions at the end through the chat function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Feel free to type questions in the chat and we will get to them at the end of our discussion today. So it is a great pleasure for me to welcome HaYehudim Baim, The Jews Are Coming, Natalie Malkos and Asaf Beiser. Take it away.
Wow, I think it's half our lecture, what you said, everything. I mean, you kind of captured the whole thing.
I think you covered the whole thing, yeah. All we have to do is just smile and show some sketches.
A little bit, another little bit introduction. We're the head writers and the creators of the show and showrunners in Israel. You do everything. And we're going to talk today about the show. We're going to show you a few sketches. We're going to talk about the way we look at writing and satire and how we use history to say something about today, and the whole idea behind the show. As we was told to you, we can put your questions in the chat, and we will even read them through the conversation. And if there's something relevant or something we're talking about, then we can squeeze it in, so you can just write it right away and we can see, maybe we can answer it. And so we just finished airing our first season in Israel, which was our most turbulent season, we would say. And the show is a bit controversial here in Israel. On one hand, we did won an Academy Award, Israeli Academy Award, we call it here. And but on the other hand, our first season also had some turbulence when we aired, and there's a story that we'll get to later. But our fourth season really exploded in a publical way. There was demonstration against us in Jerusalem, and we were kind of in the middle of a very big controversy, and a lot of even threats on the lives of our actors. So good being behind the screen, not in front of the screen in this situation. But we're over it, and I think we're on the safe side of this whole thing until the next season, which nobody in Israel still knows, and even us, when and if it will be final and commissioned, but we're very positive about it. So to start things over, Asaf will take it to you.
Yes, before we continue with the program, I just want to say how exciting it is for me to talk to you guys in Hartford. I still remember my high school days when I used to wake up in the middle of the night to watch the Huskies game. It was the times of Doron Sheffer and Ray Allen at the team. And because of the time differences, it was in the middle of the night. So I'm both excited to talk to you guys, and very happy that this time it's not in the middle of the night and I can do it in times that I'm awake, which are not too many hours in the day, I have to say, but we found the right hour. So today we will give you a small taste of The Jews Are Coming with behind-the-scenes commentary. We will talk about how we write the show and why we chose to create this kind of show in Israel. We will talk a little about the mechanism of comedy, but not too much, because analyzing comedy is like dissecting a frog, I think. it's not funny, and the frog always dies at the end of it. And we can't even eat the frog because it's not kosher. But before we start talking, let's start with a sketch.
Yes.
To show you what it's all about.
Shalom Aleichem. Aleichem Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem.
shalom עליכם. מה קרה? על מה אתם מסתכלים?
המזוזה.
היא בסדר גמור, מה הסיפור איתה?
לא נשקת מזוזה.
מזוזה. למה שנשק מזוזה?
רבי! מה זה? מה עשית לו?
סליחה, אני לא התכוונתי לעצבן אותך, כבוד הרב, אני לא יודעת מה עשית לו בסדר, ממתי אנחנו ממשקים מזוזה?
משבוע שעבר.
איפה זה כתוב?
זה לא כתוב, זה נוהג כזה.
מה זה נוהג? עכשיו התחלנו להמציא גם דברים, חסר לנו מספיק כללים.
אוי גברת, זאת פסיקה של הרייבה. תראה מה עשית לו עכשיו.
סליחה, לא התכוונתי לרב, אני לא הייתי שבוע שעבר, אני לא יודע מה צריך לעשות. חבר'ה, טיק טק, תסבירו לי מה צריך לעשות, אני אעשה את זה, נו.
אתה לא השקת מזוזה.
בסדר, לא ידעתי. איך זה... ככה?
אוי!
לא ככה! עם היד! קצת מוזר, אבל אני זורם איתכם.
רק עם היד! רק!
רק עם היד! זה הסיפור הגדול. אז ככה, נגידו ככה, בזמן אתם צריכים לצעוק עליי. זהו, גמרנו, אפשר להמשיך, אפשר לעשות משמעות. הופלה. מה זה, למי נפלה הכיפה?
יופי. לי! תנשק אותה.
מה זה נשק? גם את זה אני צריך לנשק?
זה גם בשבוע שעבר, תנשק אותה כבר!
בסדר. הנה, בסדר.
דרך אגב, איפה אתה היית כל השבוע שעבר?
עוד פעם תזכיר שבוע שעבר. אני כל השנה מגיע, פעם אחת לא מגיע, אתה עושה מזה סיפור? יצא לי איזה פיצון כזה ליד הפה, עם כזה מלא מוגלה מגעיל כזה. הלכתי לרופא, הוא אמר לי שזה הרפס.
So, just a small warm-up of the show. Well, the show, The Jews Are Coming, is a modern, secular, funny, hopefully, commentary of the history of the Jewish people. We address historical events from early biblical times up to modern Israeli history. The show deals both with historical and theological issues. For example, this sketch we just saw asked a very specific question. How did the custom of kissing the mezuzah came about? And also a broader question, a more philosophical question, you might say. Why do we need these extra customs on top of the Tariag mitzvot? You know, we have Tariag mitzvot, 613 commandments that we have to keep. Why do we need to invent more customs for ourselves?
Let's talk a little about how did we end up making The Jews Are Coming. It all started, I think, 10 years ago. I think it's already 9 or 10 years ago. We were looking for our next project. We're both history buffs. We like the Bible, we like the biblical stories, and we both had background in writing satirical shows. So we said to ourselves, let's just combine the thing together. There's a famous bit in the show Seinfeld when Jerry complains that his dentist converted to Judaism just for the jokes. I don't know if you remember it. Jerry is asked if it offends him as a Jew, and he answers, it offends me as a comedian. So before we started writing, we had to ask ourselves, do we have the background as Jews and as comedians to write this kind of show? As Jews, well, we have been Jewish since the day we were born, so we had that covered. And we have background in comedy. Well, we have been Jewish since the day we were born, so I guess that's covered as well.
So after we decided on our concept, we sat down to write our first sketch. And so where do you start when you want to understand the Jewish DNA? Well, I guess we thought that, when you want to deal with the big issues in your life, to figure out the roots of everything, what do? You go to therapy. So when you go to therapy, you wanna understand the roots of your problems, and you usually, I hope I'm not spoiling this for anyone, or maybe giving you the solution too fast, but it's your parents. So when we said, okay, if the problem is our parents and this is the root of everything, we need to address the parents of the Jewish people. And we have the father of the Jewish people, of course, Abraham. So Abraham was actually the biggest, the first character, very big character that we addressed. And we decided that if this is the father of the Jewish people, we should see what kind of dad he was, what kind of father was he. And when we started looking at the stories, I guess some of you that remember your studies of the Bible, so well, he was probably one of the worst fathers in history, especially in Jewish history. He tried to kill one of his sons. He sent one away to die in the desert. He cut both of their penises, and he left them in a real estate dispute that lasts till this day. So he was really pretty bad father. Our first idea was to send a super nanny to teach him some parenting skills. But instead of doing that, we worked this sketch, which I'm going to show you in a second. 1 second. Wait, I know, not yet. Yeah, this is the point that Asaf, you're going to have to put in a joke.
Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you to tell me when is exactly the time when you feel stuck.
Yes, this is the time. This is the time for the joke. 1 second.
Great.
Okay, here we go. Sorry for that.
מוכן?
כן, נו.
אבל שלא ייפול התופח.
ישמעאל, אני לא אוהב את המשחק הזה.
אל תדאג, יא איציק, זה רוגטקה.
אה? לא, אל תדאג, אני בטוח שהם יסכימו. יצחק, ישמעאל! בואו! אלוהים רוצה שנכרות איתו ברית!
אתה בטוח שזה מה שהוא אמר, יא בבא?
אבא, אי אפשר לעשות אולי איזה כיף מיוחד, איזה משהו כזה...
לא, 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 אתם צריכים להיות שמחים! זה יהיה סימן ההיכר של עמנו!
אין סימנים אחרים? אולי זה עגיל באוזן?
כן, כן, עגיל באוזן, זה מעולה. אבל בצד שמאל, בצד ימין זה משהו אחר.
מה? כן, כן, אני אגיד להם. אלוהים הבטיח לי שאם נעשה את זה, הוא ירבה את זרענו.
אתה באמת לא רואה את הסתירה בהבטחה הזאת?
מה אתם רוצים? לעורר את חרון אפו של אלוהים?
לא, אם ככה זה שהוא רגוע, אני בטח לא רוצה לראות אותו כועס.
בואו, אחריי. איפה יש פה איזה סלע? תניח אותו.
עכשיו?
בטח עכשיו, למה לחכות? זהו, תספור עד 3. 1, 2...
מה? הוא אמר שהוא התכוון לזית. שנחתוך כמה זיתים, נשים בסלט עם קצת לימון.
נכון, נכון, גם אני שמעתי זית. פעמיים הוא אמר זית.
רגע. זית? זית. שים אותו. ספור עד 3.
1... אבא, מה לעשות עם הכיפה?
לא יודע. שים אותה לראש.
I've seen this sketch from maybe 1,000 times, and the joke about the kippah at the end always makes me laugh. I don't know why.
And you wrote it.
I wrote it. One of the key decisions you take as a writer is which point of view you tell the story from. Choosing the unconventional point of view is one of our favorite techniques in writing The Jews Are Coming. We often choose a different point of view than the one written in the biblical story. That's a trick we do all the time. In this case, we chose to tell the story from the kids' side, Isaac and Ishmael's point of view. Changing the point of view meant silencing the voice of God in this case, because the biblical narrator is an all-knowing narrator. You can hear the voice of both God and Abraham in the Bible. It's written, but you can hear it. We don't know exactly if that's how it was, but that's how it is written. When you tell the story from the kids' point of view, all they probably heard is their father's side. So in the sketch, once we decided to change the point of view, we don't even determine whether Abraham did or did not hear the voice of God. We're just saying that everyone else in that situation could only hear Abraham. There is a certain point in history, and we can't put our finger on the exact time, when we stopped looking at people who hear the voice of God as prophets and started looking at them as crazy. The gap between these two perceptions equals comedy. Taking larger than life figures and bringing them back to a human size is something we do all the time in The Jews Are Coming. We did it with Abraham, shifting him from the father of our nation position to just an everyday dad position. And we also did it with Moses. You're on mute, Natalie.
Sorry. I was trying to get ahead with the next sketch to save a minute of pausing, and I muted myself. Okay, so going to Moses, we're still in the biblical eras for now. Moses is one of our favorite characters. We love him so much. We had 10 sketches that featured him, including the opening sketches of our first season and the closing sketches of a few seasons. Well, the main reason that we like him so much is that we feel sorry for him. Moses was a tragic hero, a leader that didn't want to lead. Today, we would say Moses is like classic middle management, right? He doesn't like his boss, God. He never stopped complaining about him. He also hated his subordinates, the Israelites, and he never stopped complaining about them. And he was always caught in between the middle of these two, trying to figure out how to keep his job without getting crazy. And he kind of wanted to quit many, many times. And so how can we not relate to this tragic character? Sometimes we look at him as someone who was stuck, like a tour guide stuck with a group of Israeli tourists from hell in a trip in the desert that doesn't end for 40 years. Sounds like hell to me. And so we're gonna watch a sketch about Moses now, and we're gonna talk a little bit later. We're gonna talk afterwards about this character and why we wrote this sketch, which is very relevant to current events. Okay. Yes. You see, I get better at it.
Mm-hmm.
We have the disclaimer here.
והדיבר האחרון, לא תחמוד אשת רעך. יש? הכל בסדר?
כן.
אפשר ללכת לאכול צהריים? מה יש לאכול היום?
משה בתיבה.
אפשר יום אחד בלי הבדיחה הזאת? תודה.
יאללה, הלכנו.
יאללה, בוא נאכל משהו.
רגע, פליצה.
מרים, אני ביקשתי ממך לא לקרוא לי ככה ליד העם, נכון?
בסדר, תגיד, לא נראה לך משהו מוזר בדיברות האלה?
מה, זה שזה נראה כמו תחת?
לא, לא זה. אתה יודע, נו, לא תרצח, לא תגנוב.
נו.
מה אם לא תאנוס?
לא היה? היה משהו דומה, לא איזה, לא תאנוס את אביך ואת אמך, לא תאנוס גדי בחלב אמו, לא היה?
לא. לא היה שום דבר על אונס.
נו בסדר, אז אין בעיה, קחי את הדיברות, תוסיפי מה שאת רוצה, יש לך כתב יפה.
פליצה, תאסוף את כולם בחזרה ותגיד להם שאלוהים אמר.
נו באמת, מירי, באמת, זה לא יכול לחכות.
לא, זה לא יכול לחכות.
למה זה לא יכול לחכות? הבנתי, בסדר. כולם לחזור בבקשה, יש לי עוד משהו קטן להגיד לכם, בואו.
רוצים לאכול.
שקט, הקשבה אליי עוד רגע. זוכרים את 10 דיברות האלה?
נו.
אז יש עוד אחד, לא תאנוס. סבבה שכל אחד יוסיף אצלו. יופי.
מה זה לא תאנוס? תגיד לי מה זה...
שקט! לסתום את הפה, פשוט לא לאנוס.
מה אם היא לבושה עם מחשוף? זה נחשב אונס?
אונס.
אונס. ואם היא לא בהכרה?
ברור שזה אונס.
ברור שזה אונס. אפשר להמשיך?
ואם היא מתה?
גם אם היא מתה, זה עדיין אונס. אז פשוט לא לאנוס, בסדר?
ומה אם היא אומרת לא, ואני לא מבין למה היא מתכוונת?
לא.
אני לא מבין למה אתה מתכוון.
לא, זה עם של קקות.
מה אני אומר לך כל הזמן? רגע. ומה אם זאת מישהי שכבר יצאנו בעבר כמה וכמה פעמים, כן? וכבר שכבנו בעבר, ועכשיו אנחנו רק ידידים, והיא באה אליי הביתה בקטע של ידידים, והישנו קצת, ונרדמנו באותה מיטה, והיא עשתה לי סימן כזה שיש מצב, ואז אנסתי אותה. זה אונס?
תגידו לי, מה יש לכם?
מה קרה?
אסור לאנוס. לא שאלו אתכם אם אתם רוצים, אמרו לכם אסור לאנוס. לא אם עשתה טיזינג, לא אם יצאתם פעם, לא אם ראית אותה ערומה. אסור לאנוס, מה לא ברור?
תודה רבה.
אלא אם אתה קצין.
מה? לא.
מה לא?
מה לא? עכשיו גם לא קצין? די, נו, מה זה? שינו את כל החוקים ולא אמרו לנו. הרגע קיבלת את החוקים, הרגע. טוב, תקשיבו, אין לי בעיה, אתם רוצים לשנות את החוקים, תעלו אתם להר זיבי הזה.
לפחות לא הייתי חוזר עם לוחות בצורה של תחת.
תראה איזה רעיון בא לי. צריך להמציא איזה מילת קוד שאז נשמע, נדע אם זה אונס או לא אונס.
נכון, רעיון מצוין. אני אומר, אם הגבר צועק אונס, זה אונס. מירי, את רואה, זה נושא מורכב, אי אפשר לפתור אותו ביום אחד.
לא, משה, זה נושא מאוד מאוד חשוב, וצריך לפתור אותו, וחשוב שכולם יבינו מה זה אונס.
אני מבטיח לך שאני אטפל בזה.
אתה מבטיח?
דבר ראשון, איך שאני נכנס לארץ המובטחת, מילה של פליצה. טוב, יאללה, בואי.
So, well, this sketch demonstrates how we use the past to say something about the present and make satire about current events. If we made the Abraham sketch more philosophical about the origins of ourselves and what does it mean to be a father, and our satire has its range. It's not always very extreme and current. Sometimes it's more it's something more philosophical, let's say. But this sketch we wrote when the Me Too movement was not even a headline. The first cases began to emerge. And in the US, it was Harvey Weinstein. We had our own scandals in Israel. You can be sure. And for us, luckily, we were in writing at the time, and we were thinking about how we can address this in our show and do sketches about, everybody was feeling that this is a big earthquake, that something big is coming, and we wanted to write something about it. So we were thinking, what can we do about it? And we decided that we want to write this sketch to reflect the spirit of the time. And the sketch does not satirically judge the Ten Commandments. Looking at biblical times with the liberal, modern, moral eyes that we have today, it just has no meaning and no saying. But taking this Ten Commandments and saying that today, actually, just as our satire, saying that today there are people who try to live rape and harassment in the gray area, and it should be black on top of white. It should be engraved in stone, and what is more engraved in stone than the Ten Commandments?
When you talk about our sketches as more philosophical or less philosophical, it always makes me feel a little funny. I don't know. It's all nonsense, I think, in some way.
Yeah, but I think it makes it, when you say it in English, it sounds more important than it does in Hebrew. When you say philosophy. That's
my exact problem, yeah.
When you say it in Hebrew, it sounds like a little bit, joking about it.
I know. When you say it in Yiddish, it sounds the best, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about Moses. Our Moses sketches talk about a variety of topics, but always rely on the problematic relationship between Moses and the people. This relationship is a big part of the comedy. In the Bible, in one point in the desert, Moses tells God, האנוכי הריתי את כל העם הזה, אם אנוכי ילדיתי הוא. הרגני נא הרוג, אם מצאתי חן בעיניך, ואל אראה ברעתי. Or in English, was I pregnant with all those people? Did I give birth to any of them? That now you want me to take care of them? If you like me, God, please just kill me. When you hear this verse, who does it remind you of? I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm listening to my mom. Moses is the classic Jewish mother. If Abraham is the father of the Jewish people, Moses is the Yiddish Mama. On the one hand, he praises the people. On the other hand, he always tells them that they are not good enough. He keeps complaining that he gave his whole life for them and constantly tries to educate them, tells them how to behave, what is permitted, and especially what is forbidden. When the people misbehave, it's Moses' job to tell them, oh, you just wait till God comes home. And finally, when it's time to enter the promised land, he stays behind in the desert saying, oh, don't mind me. I'll just stay here alone in the dark. You go ahead. A classical Jewish mother.
So we're gonna fast forward a little bit and talk a little bit about we're gonna leap over the Aliyah, I think, Avi. So we have enough time for questions and
so let's just
that sounds fine, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end.
Yeah. So we're gonna yeah, sorry, Asaf, go ahead.
Yeah. So many times we were asked about our scope. What exactly is the material that we, the Jews are coming, feel is fair game for us? We feel that we can relate to everything that is, quote, Jewish, unquote. And by Jewish, we mean four things: the Jewish history, the Jewish religion, the Jewish state, and last but not least, the Jewish people. Or in other words, Jews. And when we say Jews, we mean that every famous Jew or non-famous Jew in the last 3,000 years is fair game for us. From Sigmund Freud to Franz Kafka, from Jesus Christ to the Rothschilds, they're all part of our scope. After we started our lectures in the States, we developed a very warm and special relationship with the Jewish community. So we showed our appreciation in the only way we as the Jews are coming know. We wrote sketches about you guys. And so in season 3 and 4 of our show, you can find a lot of sketches about American Jews and about being a Jew in America, including sketches about Bugsy Siegel, Woody Allen, Jerry Seinfeld, and Ruth Westheimer. We even know that Dr. Ruth watched our sketch about her and loved it. The sketch we'll watch now is about a different American Jew named Ruth Handler. Let's watch it.
Okay, one sec. Yeah, I know, 1 second.
Yeah.
While you're loading that one, Natalie, one of the things that we've talked about in the class is the degree to which the sketches reference the Holocaust, and it's something that I want to come back to, and we'll talk about in the Q&A, in the discussion.
Okay, we'll watch this one, and then we'll watch the election one, and then we'll go to the Q&A.
בשנת 1959 רות הנדלר, בת למהגרים יהודים מפולין, השיקה בובה חדשה ומהפכנית.
מה זה דריידל גדול, מאמה? זה שופר?
או, בובלה, פשוט תפתחי את הפרזנט.
אוקיי, אני פותחת. אוקיי. מה זה? מה זה? זה גברת ממגזינים של אבא?
לא, זאת בובה יפהפייה עבורך לשחק עימה. וקוראים לה כמוך, ברבי.
קוראים לי ברברה.
בסדר, רק שיפצנו קצת את השם, אבל את מתה עליה, נכון?
אני רציתי בובה שנראית כמוני.
סוויטי, נראית בדיוק כמוך, אנחנו רק שיפצנו קצת.
זאת את, רק בלונדינית שזופה שדופה, עם חזה מסיח דעת חיוך מזמין.
אבל זה ממש לא נראה כמוני.
סוויטי, מה שחשוב זה לא שברבי תראה כמוך, זה שאת תראי כמו ברבי.
מה לא בסדר באיך שאני נראית?
הוני, את ילדה מושלמת בעינינו.
אבל לעין אנטישמית את טרף קל.
אינני מבינה.
סוויטי, את נראית יותר יהודייה מקניידל.
יש תחושה שרק מלהסתכל עלייך אני צובר ריבית.
את נראית כאילו ממש עכשיו חזרת מלבגוד בישו.
גלובוס ביד ואת קריקטורה אנטישמית.
אוקיי, אז אני נראית יהודייה, מה הבעיה עם זה?
לא, אין בעיה, אין שום בעיה. את אוהבת מקלחות?
בוודאי.
עם 100 איש ובלי מים?
תראי פחזנית אלרגנית שלי. אם עם שלנו למד משהו, זה שעדיף לא לראות כמו עם שלנו.
תביא לי את ברבי. ומה זה פה?
וואו, סורפרייז! וואו! דרים האוס משלי. לא עליית גג עלובה לכתוב ביומן ולמות, בית גדול, כמו של גויים.
And it's made out of plastic. את יכולה לקום ולקחת את זה וללכת ממקום למקום. במקרה של relocation או פוגרום.
וואו, סכנה! חיילים רעים, נאצים בפטרול. 1, 2, 3, 4, Achtung, jawohl! קוים יקרה, היית במקרה יהודי מסריח?
לא בבית הזה, אולי בבית ליד, פה בלונדינים.
תודה רבה, בבית הזה לא נאנוס, למרות שאת עושה לי חסד. להתראות!
Merry Christmas, officer!
ביי ביי.
וואו, אז היא יכולה להיות גם בנקית כמו שאני חולמת להיות?
בטח שהיא יכולה להיות בנקאית. הנה, יש לי פה מחשבון ביד בשבילה. Here! אאו! Seriously? What? בוא לא פשוט לכתוב לך ג'ו על המצח. אין מחשבון, יש לה ביקיני ועיניים ריקות. הבנת?
הבנתי, מאמה.
אוקיי, עכשיו לכי לחברות שלך, תשחקי איתן, ותראי להם שהן בדיוק כמוהן, בזמן שאני מסתכלת מהחלון בדאגה. Go, go, go.
Damn it.
Okay, so a lot was written about the Barbie doll in the past. Most was from a feminist point of view, but I think, I mean, everybody was talking, is she a good model for girls? The measurements, the realistic or not, body images and so forth, very important issues. But for us, as the Jews are coming, we tried to look at another perspective of this story. We try to understand just why a few years after World War II, an American Jew whose family came from Europe a few years earlier decided to invent a doll that looks non-Jewish in a very gentle way to saying it, but let's say it's a little bit more, and if we'll be frank about it, a doll that looks Aryan, and in other words, is why Barbie is such a shikse. So we had an interesting question, and maybe an academic one or a philosophic one, as Asaf doesn't like me saying. And now our mission was to find the answer, but not any answer, of course, a funny answer, because that's what we do. We find funny answers to interesting questions. And in case of that, our answer was to do what we would do, not only what with the Ruth Handler, but with being a Jew in the diaspora in those years meant that looking Jewish could be a problem for you. And this is the sketch that we decided to write. And from this sketch, we're gonna go to another sketch, to a time where it was really a big problem of looking Jewish. And we're gonna finish with the sketch and open for the Q&A. And now I'm gonna open that sketch. 1 second. Share screen.
בתחילת שנות ה-30 התחוללה בגרמניה מערכת בחירות סוערת. גם יהודי גרמניה התלבטו במי לבחור.
נו, בלאו, למי את מצביעה?
נראה לי שאני אצביע להיטלר.
היטלר? ואתה אייזן?
היטלר, רק היטלר.
למה?
גרינברג, כולם מצביעים להיטלר.
הוא סוחף, הוא חזק, הוא כריזמטי, והוא נראה טוב.
באמת?
הוא מדבר טוב.
כן, בלאו ואני ראינו אותו מדבר בשכונה.
צמרמורות עברו לי. בחיים לא התחברתי ככה למילים שמישהו אמר.
מה הוא אמר?
מה הוא אמר?
לא שמענו, אנחנו עמדנו מאוד רחוק.
באמת.
אבל אילו תנועות ידיים.
היו לו תנועות ידיים מאוד ברורות.
הוא פטריוט, הוא עמך גרמניה.
אין יותר גרמני מאיפה שהבחור הזה מגיע.
מאיפה הוא מגיע?
מאיפה הוא מגיע?
בוואריה היה שחור איזה קינוח כלשהו. אבל הוא, בניגוד לראש הממשלה האליטיסט שלך, הוא לא משוויץ בעבר שלו.
כן, כל מה שברונינג יודע לעשות זה להזכיר שהוא למד בלונדון ושהיטלר היה בכלא.
היטלר היה בכלא. לא משחרר, זה פעם אחת היה בכלא, זהו, סימן אותו.
כן, ואפשר לחשוב על מה.
על מה הוא ישב?
על מה הוא יהיה?
לא עולה לי כרגע, אבל זה ברור שהוא לא עשה את זה.
סתם מכפישים שם של בן אדם.
ותסכים איתי, שבן אדם שבילה את הזמן שלו בכלא כדי לכתוב ספר, הוא כנראה איש ראוי.
הוא כתב ספר?
כן.
כן, מיין קאמפף. מדהים, ספר מדהים.
על מה הספר?
על מה הספר?
זה ספר ארוך מאוד. אבל האיש סופר, זה איש רוח, זה איש משכיל, זה איש תרבות.
וגם איש צבא. הוא היה במלחמה, אל תשכח.
והוא נראה טוב עם שפם היטלר. מה הסיכויים, אני שואלת?
טוב, הוא גם פטריוט, גם גיבור, גם מדבר טוב, גם נראה טוב, גם כתב ספר. מה יש פה בכלל להתלבט?
ואתה יודע מה, גרינברג? מקסימום לא טוב, עוד 4 שנים נחליף אותו.
בדיוק.
נחליף אותו.
בדיוק.
לחיי העם והדמוקרטיה.
לחיי גרמניה.
So once again, I think it's a sketch that takes place in 1933, but tells us a lot about today. It is an example to another way we crack sketches. It happens when we come across an interesting and unfamiliar fact that has implications for our days as well. This is a sketch we wrote after discovering a very interesting detail, that several thousand Jews voted for Hitler in the elections of 1993, the elections that he won. One of the things I love about our show is that we aim our satire not only to the leaders and governments, but also to the people. We did it in Moses' sketches, there's the one we watched, and here as well. The criticism is not aimed at the corrupt and terrible violent leader, but to the voters in the democratic system, the people. The sketch is about how we decide how to cast our vote. Today, maybe it's not gossip in the cafe like in the sketch, but by reading misleading or even fake news on Facebook and Twitter, or even worse, listening to the actual news. But I think today we have the same problem. I think it's relevant not only in the States this week, but all around the world. Democracy is in trouble.
Yes, democracy isn't working anymore. Help. I need something new. So we're gonna short wrap up. Beyond the specific idea that each sketch in our show carries, we feel that there's a bigger value to the show as a whole. And there are voices in the Jewish people today that claim that they know the real Judaism. They feel like the Bible is their private property, and they speak in the name of God. In the last century, the distance between secular Jews and the Bible grew vastly, but even more apart with the religious establishment. So, but in the past few years, there's a reverse movement in Israel, and more secular Jews are growing back, are coming back to the tradition, to the religious, in a cultural and historical way. We don't want to become religious, but we strive to reclaim the Bible and the Jewish tradition. And you know, if we used to have a holy book that was Harry Potter, so we can go back to our true holy book. So the Jews are coming as part of that movement. We too are here to say the Bible is ours, the biblical heroes are ours, the Judaism is ours, and we have every right to read it, comment on it, laugh about it, especially laugh about it. And that's our conclusion for our short lecture here, and we're open for questions.
Great, thank you. This has really been an amazing sort of, first of all, introduction, I think, to your show and to HaYehudim Baim for an audience that might not be as familiar with it. And I appreciate your sort of taking the time to do the overview of some of your greatest hits from the past 4 seasons that give some of that overview. The chat is open for people who have questions, and I'll start with some questions just to get us going with the discussion, but I'd welcome people in the audience to also ask questions. There was a question that came in, first of all, about sort of how do we watch the shows, and I'll just note that many episodes have been uploaded to YouTube because it's on the public broadcasting system. It's sort of publicly available. Fortunately for us, you were able to share episodes or sketches that you have English subtitles to, and some of your legions of fans out there in the YouTube universe have done us the favor of translating some of them. So there are sketches that have English subtitles, although not always as accurate as the ones that you have created. So I'll start with actually the point that you ended with, which is this sort of engagement with religion, with Jewish tradition, and what you said is sort of like a project of a secular reclaiming of the texts, which I think is really interesting. And one of the things that I'm interested in is, so you use humor to kind of, I refer to it as a type of midrash, right? You're sort of filling in the blanks of the text, recreating sort of humorous midrashim, but it's still midrash. And I want to ask, to what extent so you say it's a kind of reclaiming of the text, but you're also going back in time to do a present day critique of the religious establishment. So would you say you're doing both at the same time, or do you feel like you're doing more a present day critique of the monopoly on religion and religious identity, or is it sort of using the humor as midrash to do that at the same time?
I think we do it in the same time. We have also sketches about the actual establishment, and we have sketches about the actual stories. I mean, we kind of, use, when we want to talk about the actual tradition establishment, so we use that very specifically. I think that what you said about the midrash, about filling in the blanks, that the big difference between us and the traditional commentaries of the Bible, first of all, commenting on the Bible and doing the midrash, of course, where if we even humbly say that we're part of a very long legacy of commentators on the Bible. But I think that we don't fill in the blanks. We do fill in the blanks, but mostly if the traditional commentaries took all the contradictions in the text and try to resolve them, so we find the contradiction in the text and the absurdity in the stories, and we blow them up, and we put them on the screen, and we make them more, and we take them to the extreme. Instead of saying, okay, listen, let's solve this problem and this ridiculous story or this confliction in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, but murder, but then go kill everybody in the promised land so we can go live there. So instead of finding a way to make these two live together, we kind of show this conflict and this contradiction in the text. So this is like how we're different than regular commentators that do midrash, I think.
But I want to talk about how we're a little similar to those who did midrash. Regarding your question, I think that the midrash has always been a way for the people, the early rabbis of Israel, to say something about their time using biblical stories. So I think actually it's a little bit of both, and that's exactly what we're not doing midrash. We're doing a comic midrash, a satirical midrash, which is not a midrash. It's a little like it, but I think that's what they've done. They've done the same. They've used the biblical stories to say things about their times, and we're using it to say things about our time or about those times, I think they used to mix it, and I think that we're mixing it as well. So for your answer is what we call here a little bit of a mishmash. It's a little bit of both.
To use a technical Jewish term.
Exactly. I think it's from the Bible, isn't it?
And it does it effectively, and it can have multiple meanings for different audiences at the same time, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that was interesting in sharing some of the sketches with the class is that there are certain sketches that translate better for an American audience than others. And I think maybe some of the biblical ones do this quite well. Like I think the one that you just referenced, the lo tirtzach, ma lo barur belo tirtzach, right? Like it says, don't murder what's not clear. And then you analyze the contradictions in that sort of those commandments. But I'm interested in this question of sort of like how, so on the one hand, I suggested that you're engaging with a broader tradition of Jewish humor. You're bringing Israeli humor, which tried to stand out of, in a Zionist sense, of Jewish history, separate itself from Jewish history back into the conversation with Jewish history. You're bringing Israeli humor back into the stream of Jewish humor. But I'm also wondering about sort of that question of audience, right? So when you perform for an Israeli audience, or your show is broadcast for an Israeli audience, there's a lot of inside jokes that an Israeli audience is going to understand. So do you ever think about how this is going to translate for an American audience, right? Like the Barbie one is clearly one that sort of might resonate in a different way with an American audience. So how much are you thinking about those different, let's say, Jewish audiences in Israel versus America and their knowledge of Jewish history or biblical history or Israeli history?
I think that in every sketch we try to write it in few levels or few voices that a few audiences will get. There are always jokes that the people in Israel will get better than the people in the States. There are always jokes that the religious audience will get better than the secular audience in Israel. We don't give it too much thought, I think, about American audience or Israeli audience. We do refer to Jewish audience. I think what you said about bringing Israeli humor back to the Jewish humor, I think it's brilliant. I always thought about it the other way around. I always thought about how we're bringing Jewish subjects into Israeli humor. I never thought about how we're bringing Israeli humor into this big, massive thing called Jewish humor. But I'm not sure that we really give it any attention while writing. How will the American audience or will the Jewish in the diaspora will get it? We just, we have those common grounds that we have. They just work. We just connect. That's what we found out after season 1, I think. Only after season 1 we understood it. We thought we were talking only to Israeli audience at the beginning of the things. After season 1, suddenly we understood, oh my God, it's broader than what we think.
Let's say that we never thought we're going to sell it to Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. And we still don't think we're going to sell it to Netflix.
That wasn't on our mind when we wrote this show. We were writing other shows that we want to sell to Netflix. This is not the show that we ever planned on selling anywhere outside Israel. We're kind of always afraid that if you take it outside of Israel, it becomes anti-Semitical a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. That's even one of the reasons we don't translate too many of them, I think, subconscious, because, it's our thing. It's our jokes. It's something that you and I can understand without.
And in a joke of the people, we can't, other people won't understand. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
I think that's an excellent point, right? Where you sort of translate what's inside humor. It depends who's telling the joke, right? And it depends what the intent and the audience is. So, and this is one of the things that's interesting, I think, about jokes that we would categorize as Holocaust humor, right? So it's one thing if you as, either descendants of Holocaust survivors or Jews who are living in Israel are telling jokes. It's something very different if, it's used as a weapon against Jews, right? Or to diminish or trivialize the Holocaust. So the audience makes all the difference and the intent of the writer makes all the difference.
Yes.
I want to get to some of the questions that have been coming in because there's some really good questions. So Sorry, there's so many. I'm going to try to catch up here, but there's a question that came in about sort of how you're adapting to COVID for the upcoming season. Are you writing scenes with only one person at a time or something? Are you doing a sketch connecting COVID and the 10 plagues? And I think I'm glad that you started with the mezuzah sketch, which is sort of very appropriate in the time of Corona, right? Where you think about sort of spreading disease. But can you talk a little bit, not only about how you completed season 4, did you finish everything before Corona? And also, what are you thinking about for next year in terms of how this is going to affect your process and writing, and also new topics and material that you might be thinking of in light of the current moment?
Well, we finished shooting long before we finished even airing, I think, most of it before the Corona. And if we're gonna start on schedule.
We aired it during the Corona.
Yeah, but we finished shooting way before, and if everything goes on schedule that we're planning, we're gonna shoot hopefully after the summer, which Corona hopefully will be history, and the next summer. How will it echo in our I don't know, how will COVID echo in our lives? I mean, before we are writers, and we are people and parents and children of people, and we still don't know how this will affect our lives in so many ways. And in the same way, we don't know how this will affect our writing. I'm sure a sketch about the plague or whatever will probably come about. And I don't know. It's a question, because, you know, now it feels still we're in the midst of it. So I don't really know how it will affect me creatively a year from now or half a year from now that we'll start writing, I hope, and what will be the status then. But I'm sure that will be sketches that talk about it in some way. It's like, it feels like there is no other option.
There's a few questions that have come in on sort of the religious aspect, but also in terms of the audience that you referenced. Sort of in terms of audience, there are certain things that it's insider humor that would only be understood by somebody who has a very sort of close understanding of Tanakh, right? And you clearly you know sort of the texts, and you are able and know biblical history and Jewish history very, very well, because you're able to make these jokes about it, and it's part of that engagement with it. And I'm going to try to group together a few of the questions that have come in the chat. I think a lot of them fall into the category of the response of, let's call it the sort of Orthodox community, both in Israel, and we can look at it in the United States. Can you talk a little bit about some of the pushback that you've gotten, sort of why you see that coming in, how that maybe has influenced your humor? And somebody else is asking about, you know, is there anything in terms of your biblical humor? Is there anything that's too sacred that you wouldn't cross it? Are there any red lines that you wouldn't cross? So, or do those responses kind of lead you to say, oh, you didn't like that, well, let me show you this, right? So, you know, how would you say you're engaging with what, let's call the criticism, which is also quite political this current year, because you tap into the fact that your show is a comedy show that's broadcast on a public television network, and that if there are political parties that are opposed to your show, they can have an influence on the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Culture. They can say, don't show your sketches for educational purposes in Israeli schools, or don't show it on television because it offends part of the community. So how do you deal with that? How do you engage with that controversy, and what is your response to that?
Well, the last part has already happened. I have to tell you. The Minister of Education has decided that the sketches of the Jews are coming will not be shown in schools. Many Bible teachers in Israeli schools, both high schools and elementary schools, use their sketches to get the kids to like the Bible. I think that's why they show our sketches, and to remember the stories. But the good member Minister of Education decided that will not happen anymore, that we're banned from the schools. I have to tell you that that's not a big problem for us. I mean, we don't do our show, it's satire. We don't do it to be a part of the establishment. We don't do it to be shown in schools. And I think the kids would love the show even more if they're forbidden, if it's forbidden for them. We had a big backlash, as Natalie and you said at the beginning. There were big demonstrations and big protests against the show. I think it will influence season 5. I think it will influence season 5 in the way we will approach things. I don't think it will be softer in any way. I don't think it will be what they expect it to be. We will obviously have to address the protest itself in some way in season 5. That's to answer the first question and the last part of your question. Regarding the middle part about are there things that we will never touch and we will not are forbidden for us? I don't think there's anything like that. I don't, right, Natalie? I don't think that there anything that you can say that we will not address because of the protest or for any other reasons.
No, I think that we have our own set of rules going to writing something. And let's say we find something very controversial that we know it would be a subject that will be very controversial. Of course, first of all, the first thing that we check is this funny? Because after all, that's our job and we're here to entertain. And the second thing we're gonna check is this worth saying? Is this satire something we stand behind it? If we get a backlash about it, are we gonna stand behind it and won't back down? And I mean, not back down, but we know why we did the sketch. And that for us, the minute that we have a solid reason of doing the sketch, and that's enough for us. I mean, we know, people will be offended. Comedy touches people in different places, and and for some people, the Bible is what you call too soon, and it's not something they want to joke about, and that's fine, and they can switch channel. I just want to put a small disclaimer that we're still have freedom of speech, so, and democracy kind of. So teachers can show the sketches in school, but it's not in the curriculum. We actually got to be part of the curriculum in schools because biblical teachers of the Bible loved so much the sketches. So in the site of the Ministry of Education, there were sketches, and it was really part of some of the school's curriculum. So then they took it off. But if you're a teacher in Israel, you can still show the sketches. And I promise you that a lot of teachers that I know, because of what happened, actually show the sketches even more. So, controversy is always for satire, as long as there's free speech and we're not in jail. So it's good for us. But, as Asaf said, I guess it will get into our minds. We can't ignore it. But hopefully it won't make us softer. I don't think it will.
Last thing about this subject, I think that in the last few years, the field of comedy is narrowing from two directions. It's getting smaller and smaller from two directions. One comes from the right, and that's lack of sense of humor, maybe I'll call it, or lack of tolerance for many subjects and nationalism in some way. And another enemy of comedy comes from the left side, I think, and that's politically correctness. I think both of them are narrowing the field of comedy. Both of them are narrowing the scope of what you can talk about and laugh about in comedy. I think that the Jews are coming has a problem with both sides, unfortunately. But I think that we, as a decision, decided that we will keep doing our thing until they'll kick us out. I don't know from which direction it will come. Until they kick us out, we will do our thing. Maybe it's not 2020 in any way. I think it's still 2020. Maybe in 2022 it will look too rough to people. But until then, we will keep doing our thing and not let the critique and from both sides get to us.
And that last point is a really interesting point about sort of the political narrowing of the comic sphere on both sides, which is really interesting to consider, and also the ways in which, you know, it's sort of both in Israel and in America. And there is a question about sort of the comedy scene in Israel that I think might segue from that one, which is, first of all, what does, I think for our American audience, can you talk a little bit about what the comedy scene looks like in Israel? You know, stand-up comedy, which was such a big deal in the United States, still is a big deal in the United States, and American Jews played a disproportionately large role in development of stand-up comedy. You know, something like 75 or 80% of comedians in the 70s and 80s in the United States were Jewish, right? So it's hugely.
Go back to the Borscht.
Exactly, like going back to the Borscht Belt, and you're kind of, you know, you have influences in your work. You're like Mel Brooks, you know, for example, like you can see that, or Seinfeld, who you reference.
Monty Python.
Monty Python. Yeah, you know, History of the World. I mean, this is like a whole 4 seasons of History of the World, in a sense. But can you give us a sense, because stand-up comedy in Israel is not, it's been rapidly developing in the last 10 years or so, but it's not at the same point that it was here. And obviously now with COVID, you know, can't do stand-up right now. But can you tell us a little bit about the comedy scene in Israel, and, you know, sort of where do you fit into it, and some of your actors who are, you know, is amazing cast that you have, supremely talented, but somebody noted that they've seen them in other things. I mean, it seems like a pretty small world of sort of comedians and comic actors in Israel. So tell us a little bit about that scene.
The comedy, you know, this is a very small country, and I'm pretty sure I heard this fact from my husband, which is he knows a lot about TV in a more academical way, but we produce more shows per capita than any country in the world, in dramas, comedy shows, and the production here, the amount of productions here, and with the production value, not, you know, we sell shows, you know, not comedies, but it's really the industry is big, but yet small because it's still Israel. We do have a very big stand-up comedy crowd here. There's a lot of shows usually. You can always catch a show in Tel Aviv when you come. Not much as in the States and New York and LA, but still pretty live. And even a few satirical shows and comedies. I guess that you know, the Jewish humor is very not the famous, was it Jay Leno or I don't remember who was it, right? That he went on stage one night in a show and he did his monologue and nobody laughed, and he said, well, it's Yom Kippur, all the Jewish writers are not here. So, you know, we have a lot of comedies. The comedy scene is pretty developed here. But now again, it's, you know, at least the shows and everything is very infected by COVID. I don't know, Asaf, you have something to add about that?
I think that's the Israeli comedy scene, both stand-up comedy and TV comedy, is one of the best in the world. I really believe that. I know comedy from all around the world. It's not as developed as the States, obviously, because we don't have not the amounts nor the roots of it, but I really think it's one of the best in the world. So we have great stand-up comedians, really great, really original stand-up comedians that approach things differently. We have great writers, TV writers for shows. And you're asking about, is it a small clique of writers and comedians? Yes, it is, unfortunately, but it's because of two reasons. First, because we're a small country, and the second one, which is related to the first one, is that we don't get paid as you get paid in America, I think, in the top. So you can't just live from writing HaYehudim Baim. You have to write for Zeuze as well, and you have to write to 3 or 4 Fauda as well, and or 3 or 4 other shows at the same time. So yes, it's a small click, but you can get into it if you're good enough, I think. It happened to me.
It could happen to anybody if it happens to you.
So yes, it's small and very, very funny group of people. I can tell you that the writing room of The Jews Are Coming is probably the funniest room I've ever been in.
So one of the students in the class wants to know the sketches that you write. How do you have any that have been influenced by personal experiences? How do you incorporate that into what you write?
Well, it's
all the time. It's hard to give an example from The Jews Are Coming. I think in our sitcom.
No, I have an example.
Okay, maybe it's a good. Tell them that we have a sitcom coming up on Keshet next week. New one. So there you will find more biographical stuff, I think.
Yeah.
What do you have from The Jews Are
Coming?
but I mean,
what's the new sitcom called?
It's called Anachala, Homegrown.
Homegrown, that will be the American name, but Anachala in Israel.
Yeah. Well, I think the question is that, of course, as a writer, a lot of what we do and what our lives go into characters. There is something that my mom used to do, something that happened to me in an Abraham sketch where he says to Ishmael, and he brings him to the desert to live in there. And he says, I'm so sorry, I forgot to pick you up from the trip from school. And he said, no, it's okay. This happened to me. My mom forgot to pick me up from a trip from school. So, I mean, everything, it's small stuff in The Jews Are Coming, but, relationships, everything is influenced. We have a sketch.
I have an example as well, I think. I have a good example as well. From season 4, the sketch about Bilam. We discussed Bilam, the one who came to curse and always ended up blessing. And we thought about how exactly is this possible? Someone who always comes for a fight and ends up blessing. And eventually we came up that Bilam was probably had a problem with confrontations.
It was very non-confrontational.
Yeah, it was very non-confrontational, all pumped up and never really saying the right words, always backing up. And I think that's a really big part of me that I just added to Bilam with our writers.
Even we have a sketch about the first season about Obadiah, who was the only prophet who had 1 chapter in the Bible. So we wrote a sketch about an artist, about a writer who wanted to have like the biggest epic 60 chapters in the Bible, but he was edited down to 1 chapter. And it's such a meltdown, as a creator. This is a sketch about being a writer, basically. And so, we found our lives, of course, go into writing. There's no other way to write.
So we have just a few more minutes, but I did want to ask you, and I have so many questions, and can continue. We could go on forever, but we'll just take a few more minutes before we wrap up. The political humor, right? So like that last one that you showed us, which was made, a couple of years ago, but it resonates, I think, probably for an American audience in a very strong way about sort of the one, I'm referring to the one of the Jews who voted for Hitler.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I'm curious as to sort of how effective do you see your humor being as a type of political satire, right? So on the one, and there's always this debate, right? Like, how effective is satire in the political sphere? Does it work as a form of critique, or does it kind of soften the blow of, the thing that you're criticizing? So the perfect example is, Alec Baldwin here on Saturday Night Live, who was playing Donald Trump in 2016 in the lead up to the election. There was a sense that it sort of, on the one hand, yes, it portrayed Donald Trump in a clownish way, but on the other hand, it kind of softened the danger. And so I'm wondering how you deal with that, right? To what extent do you think about your humor, in the political sense as being, is it effective satire? Is there such a thing as effective satire, or is it really just about making people laugh and you're not as worried about the political goals?
I believe there is such a thing as an effective satire, but I believe you can't look at it to the short term. To the short term, there's no such thing as effective satire. I don't think that anyone ever watched a sketch and said, okay, I'm going to vote to someone else. I don't think that has ever happened. I think it happens in small steps. I think it happens for a long time. I think it happens in very small changes, very, very small changes. What we really try to do is to make people, to help people start thinking about things otherwise. That's the way it helps. And in that term, it is effective. It's not effective politically in that sense of making people vote in a different way, but it does help people think otherwise. I know that people who watch the show, even if they didn't change their mind, they did open their mind. And that's a very big thing to do in satire, I think. I know that that's what we're trying to do, to change the way people look at things. But once again, not to change their vote in any way. I think that in Israel, we have the best left-wing satire for years. The biggest shows here have always been with leftish kind of tone, like Eretz Nehederet and even our show in some sense. And still, the country is voting right all the time. So that answers your question, I think, at least part of it.
I think that, when you want to make people think, I don't think that satire changes anything. But I do think that we have a very specific and actual, part in conversation and in society, which is keeping freedom of speech. As satire writers, one of our jobs is to make sure that, what we talked about 2 questions ago, that we're not politicized and we're not afraid of saying what I want to say, and, keeping pushing the envelope and saying, and if someone tries to censor us, to speak up and do something. And this is like the actual job that we have in democracies, in society, in the political conversation. As Asaf said, I don't think that television can change anybody's mind, but if we did a good job, you'll think about something afterwards.
And what you asked about, do all we really do is cushion the blow, soften the blow, or help the people blow steam, and by that helping the government, is something I think about a lot, I have to tell you. If it's true, I think we're both going to writer's hell. I really think that it's something that's really on my mind a lot. I don't think it's true. I don't believe it's true. I think we do change.
I think in our show it's not true, because I think it's true when you take like the big politicians and you make them as a caricature, and you display them every week, making jokes about them, making them a little bit foolish, a little bit dumb, a little bit more likable. I think that does soften the blow. I think that it does make them feel less harmful to the audience. I think our show doesn't do that, not because we're better than them in any way, because we have the privilege of not dealing with current events and taking the same politicians and the same characters and, making them funny every week and more ridiculous. And, we don't have this, this is not part of the show. So in that way, we're a little bit more protective of this scenario, and I think it's completely something that happens in satire. I think it's the same here with Bibi Netanyahu and Eretz Nehederet. His character there is already even Miri Regev, which is displayed. She's a man is playing her, and she's so like vulgar and everything, but it makes her, I think, even more likable for people who like her.
Thank you. It's really fascinating and a very sort of thoughtful approach to it. And I think your point about sort of playing a really important role in maintaining free speech in a democracy, I mean, it points to just how important humor is and the function of humor. In my Jewish humor class, we spent a lot of time talking about Lenny Bruce, right? And sort of the role that he played in the American context. You know, it wasn't always about being funny, but it was about pointing out the importance of having free speech in a democratic society. So yeah, really, really amazing. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. This was really incredible. And on behalf of my students, who there's no pop quiz, but they are actually writing reaction papers to what they learned today. So
I wonder how much I would get on the pop quiz.
I'll send you the papers to grade if you don't mind.
Okay, that's
later.
fine.
So,
We have the time.
yeah, great. So really on behalf of the UConn Center for Judaic Studies and the Greenberg Center at the University of Hartford, and I was laughing to myself, Greenberg is the character in your Jews voting for Nazis sketch, Jews voting for Hitler sketch. And I should mention, and I don't think he's on the call anymore, but Arnold Greenberg, who is the founder of the Greenberg Center, was here earlier as part of the program, and I'm going to ask him later because Arnold Greenberg was also the inventor of the Cabbage Patch doll.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting fact for us.
Yeah, he had to sign off apparently, but I wanted to hear what Arnold thought about your Barbie sketch.
Oh my God.
Maybe we'll connect you some other time. But I really just want to thank you so much. Toda rabba. It was
Thank you for
really,
inviting us. We had a great time.
yeah.
Thank
So
you.
thanks
It was a
for
pleasure.
being here. Be well, stay healthy. Everybody
You
stay
too.
healthy, stay safe. Toda rabba.
Thank you. Toda. Bye.
Bye.
תודה רבה.